there was a potential king who presented competition. He would take care of eliminating all danger. This was his first attempt to finish off the boy. Herod, the villain, wanted to put an end to the true king of the Jews who came as the shepherd of God's people. But even the great King Herod, with all his ingenuity to remain in power tyrannically, even with all his intelligence apparatus, could not eliminate the king who had been born. The wise men did not return to give him the location of the child. Having been warned in a dream of Herod's evil intentions, they returned home by another route, and thus his first attempt to destroy the king who had been born was frustrated. But, not satisfied with this, he made a second attempt to nullify God's plan for his people. Matthew 2:16 says, "When Herod realized that the wise men had mocked him, he became angry and ordered the killing of all the children under 2 years of age in and around Bethlehem, according to the time he had learned from them, the wise ones." 691. Desperate measures of a tyrant and ruthless king. How much suffering it must have brought to the families of all those children who were cruelly murdered. Herod thought that in this way he would be able to put an end to the king who had been born, who had been able to oppose God's plan for his people. But it was not like that. Matthew 2:13-14. When they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, because Herod is going to look for the child to kill him." So he got up while it was still night, took the child and his mother, and set out for Egypt, where he remained until Herod's death. Not only was the child's life providentially preserved, but he outlived Herod. Egypt was the refuge until the threat of the villain Herod had passed. There is no enemy that can frustrate the redemptive plans of the Lord. The proud fall, evil plans are frustrated. The kingdom of God remains. 2 attempts to destroy the king of God's people. 2 attempts frustrated, by the power of the God of that town. Therefore, my brothers, we can say of the life of Herod and his fruitless efforts to oppose the plans and purposes of God, there is no power in heaven or on earth that can hinder the redemptive purposes of the Lord. There is no power in heaven or on earth that can prevent the God of purpose from accomplishing what he intends in his world, in his kingdom, in his church, in his people, in his children of him. God's plan is not like ours. I'm sure that something you planned to do today didn't go as planned, or at the end of the day it won't happen exactly as you planned. But God's plan is unalterable. If you are in a true and authentic relationship with God through Christ, you can take it for granted that God will complete his unalterable plan for your life. And with that conviction you can look at what is happening around you and know that God in his plan has foreseen all these circumstances, and that in the end he is directing them for your highest good, which is to be similar to Jesus. That is why the Apostle Paul can repeat with conviction, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" And later in that same passage of Romans 8, exclaim in verses 35 and on, "What can separate us from the love of Christ? Tribulation, anguish, persecution, famine, nakedness, danger, sword." The circumstances you are going through could discourage you. It may be that your circumstances are so difficult that you come to think that God has left or abandoned you, that circumstance is so entangled that it leaves you outside of God's reach and plan for your life. But look at what Paul says about difficult circumstances. Do you want to talk about difficult circumstances? Here you have a bouquet of them. All of them had been the daily bread for the apostle, but all of them did not lead him to conclude that God's purpose would not be fulfilled, or that God had abandoned him in the middle of the process. The circumstances he was going through were not a thermometer to know how much God loved him. On the contrary, he knew that in the midst of any circumstance, what he could count on was, precisely, the love of God, who was transforming him into the likeness of Jesus.